When I first heard this episode title several weeks back, I could already sense that the story would have something to do with lip syncing. It makes for yet another clever reference that only the adults would understand, and even then, not everyone would get that reference right off the bat. I, for one, still enjoy a lot of the subtle humor that the MLP staff put into this show. We get a new song from Fluttershy, and while it may not be all that long, her singing voice continues to be a joy to listen to, and the rest of the main six seem to agree. Now, I'm sure that a lot of us were wondering why the others wouldn't have heard Fluttershy's lovely singing voice before, but at least the writers are trying to address that fact when Twilight says, "Never heard you sing a solo like that before." Everyone tries to encourage Fluttershy to do more, and it quickly becomes apparent that she is not interested. But I am glad to see that Fluttershy is willing to stand up for herself here. I was a little worried that the rest of the main six would start overwhelming Fluttershy until she gives in, like back in Magic Duel. Actually being honest with the others as to why she doesn't want to perform and even straight out saying no when Rarity asks her to take part in the Ponytones performance is pretty good for Fluttershy. And speaking of the Ponytones, this quartet actually sounds really good. And I'm glad that I can hear Big Mac singing this time around and even having a few moments where he is the only one singing. When I first saw Big Mac making an appearance, I thought that the writers might actually be continuing with that running gag where others keep interrupting him. But he gets more of a role in this episode than I had expected. I do hope this trend continues. Plus, we get to see Pinkie Pie having that devious smile in the background and then winning the turkey call competition despite Big Mac's best efforts. So they actually came up with a clever and entertaining reason as to why Big Mac lost his voice in the first place. I also like seeing another appearance of Zecora, although this time it doesn't feel like she's being shoehorned into the plot like she was back in the season opener. Surprisingly, we also get a callback to bridal gossip that actually has a real bearing on the story. The writers put in a reference to a Season 1 episode without having it just for the purpose of fan pandering.
And hearing Flutter Guy again certainly adds a lot of entertainment to the episode.
Especially when we hear the completed quartet piece. This is a fun bit of music they have here. Reminds me a lot of my own experiences taking part in a singing quartet. The voices they chose make for some lovely harmonies, which naturally leads into other ponies making requests for a performance. Now again, Rarity could have gone the route of insisting that Fluttershy just keep up the charade for another day, but the writers make this story element much better overall when Fluttershy is the one who wants to keep this going more than Rarity does. It would have reflected rather poorly on Rarity if she was the one pressuring Fluttershy, rather than Fluttershy not wanting to disappoint others who are making the requests. And it seems that Fluttershy is actually starting to enjoy herself, despite the fact that no one else knows that she is the one doing the singing. But eventually the truth has to come out, and while much of this episode is rather predictable, it is interesting to see a return of Fluttershy's previous anxieties. Maybe not quite the level of Hurricane Fluttershy, but some of it does come pretty darn close. However, I like the fact that this story is teaching how you can overcome your fears when you realize that your expectations may not actually be what happens. That by itself is a pretty good message. And if the writers had left it just at that, I'd say that it was pretty worthwhile. But they show that Fluttershy doesn't overcome all her fears in one go either. She talks about how she'll get there someday, but she's taking baby steps right now, and her friends are being very understanding about it. That one sentence from Fluttershy turned a fairly relatable and worthwhile message into a far more relatable and fantastic message. This is a lesson that shows how both sides of the issue at hand can learn something new from this experience. You don't often see that in media, and once again MLP manages to exceed our expectations with such a concept. Now, before I close out this review for today, there is one more element to this episode that I'm sure a lot of people will be discussing: Pinkie Pie. I've heard so many people talk about how Pinkie is being a little too random and a little too out there during Season 4, and I myself have had hopes that we'll be seeing more of the down-to-earth Pinkie Pie on occasion. Seeing her here, though, I began to see a bit of a different side to Pinkie that I actually think does work for her character. I'm sure that a lot of us were looking at Pinkie's actions in this episode and may have thought that the writers were making her out to be too childish and insensitive the whole time. As for me, I don't really see her that way here. I don't think Pinkie is being stupid. I think it's more that she's being clueless. And believe me, there is a difference. There isn't any ill intent on Pinkie's part here, and in her own way she believes that she is helping. The rest of the main six try to reel her in, and with good reason. But again, I don't think that the writers are trying to portray Pinkie as being stupid. I can actually relate to Pinkie a little bit here. I know that I am very smart when it comes to a lot of things in life, but when it comes to talking to others, the intentions behind what I say are not the same as how others interpret it. And that really comes down to being clueless about social cues rather than just being insensitive. And the fact that Pinkie has to keep being reminded of this fact is something I can relate to as well. It can be hard for some people to understand that how they say something is projecting a different message than what they intend. I'm still learning how to do this, and I can see Pinkie still learning this as well. So while I'm sure that some other people out there believe that the writers are portraying an unrealistic character in Pinkie, this is one of those cases where I actually think that this is more true to life than what appears at first glance. At the very least, Pinkie is still trying to get better at it, and still trying to be social despite having the occasional issues. And I really need to learn from her example. Sometimes being afraid can keep you from doing what you love, but I hope that each of us are learning to take baby steps in overcoming those fears, believing that we will get there someday. In the meantime, though, I would like to hear your thoughts. Do you think that this was a good portrayal of Fluttershy's character? Did you enjoy the first episode to have the main focus on Fluttershy and Rarity since green isn't your color? Can you relate to the message of overcoming your fears in order to discover your true talents? What is your opinion on Pinkie Pie and her actions in this episode? I would like to hear your thoughts on Filli Vanilli.
And here's to hoping that we get another appearance of Flutterguy in the near future. I am DRWolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.
The editing for this review had been put together by GreeneFlower, and I gotta say that I am thoroughly impressed with how quickly she rose to the challenge. I only messaged her this morning about whether she could help me with the editing process, and she did not disappoint. But I would like to hear from each of you on what you think of this new look for DRWolf's videos. Could this style fit with the tone and dialogue of DRWolf? Can you think of any tweaks that might make things look even better? Would this new format be more visually pleasing than my previous editing for videos? Let us know, and here's to hoping that we can continue to make this channel even better for the future. I am DRWolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.